Come over here. Come over here. Come on. Come on. Oh, you almost got it. Here. You want cheese? Oh, do anything for cheese. Hey y'all, Dixie here. Today I want to talk to you about my little rescue dog daughter, Fancy May, and why I'm taking her out on the PCT with me this summer to fill in the fire closure areas for my thru hike in 2017. And I also want to cover the gear we're going to use for her while we're out there. Fancy May is an American Heinz 57 mutt who I found when she was about 10 to 12 weeks old. She is 3 years old now. She was actually down in the backyard behind my fence on a trash pile and was nearly starved to death. When I first found her, I brought her in the house and she was absolutely terrified of me. It took a couple of weeks before she was willing to let me pet her and love on her. She was just very, very skittish from the beginning. She was in love with my dog son, Hank, though, who now is 12 and a half years old. And so I was able to kind of get her to trust me by showing her, you know, Hank's not freaking out, so this must be okay. And that's kind of how I taught her things like load up in the truck or just anything that she's learned. She learns a lot faster if Hank is there as a tool to kind of help her feel more comfortable. So, you know, Hank is getting older now though. In December of this year, 2019, he will be 13 years old. So it's time for Fancy to gain a little more confidence in herself and to learn that, you know, mom is okay. And by all means, we are a lot closer now than, you know, when I first found her, but she still seems to use Hank more as a security blanket. So it occurred to me, you know, I'm going out on this trail for 2 months. It's not a thru hike and I'm going to be out there just filling in sections. So this would be a good time to kind of get her into backpacking and to have more time to bond with her. As I mentioned before, when I first found her, she had a lot of anxiety and unfortunately it hasn't gone away. It's become more manageable as she learns to trust me and she gets more comfortable with people, but any little change in her lifestyle seems kind of like a big deal to her. I talked to her veterinarian and he suggested putting her on an anti-anxiety medication that is made specifically for dogs called Clomicalm. So we started her on that and I began introducing her to different gear that she'll be using on the PCT. I also, you know, introduced her to her tent and I taught her kennel, which she's used to being crated in the house, now means get in your tent. So we were able to slowly start working on her with some things. She's also been through obedience classes, which she graduated from. So I've already started noticing her feeling a little bit more confident in herself. And I feel like that's a mixture of working with her on obedience and building confidence like that, and also now having her on the anxiety medication for a couple months. And I know that the trail heals people and helps them with depression and anxiety, and so I'm hoping that it will do the same for Fancy. You know, her having a constant goal to work on, getting a lot of exercise, and, you know, being put in different situations where she learns to adjust. So hopefully that'll help. We'll see. So now let's talk about the gear that Fancy will be using while she is out on trail. I will be carrying some of this. I'm not going to load her up with all of it. I've read different percentages, but for a young, healthy dog like Fancy, they say up to 25% of their body weight can be carried. Fancy weighs 46 pounds, so that's I think 11 and a half pounds that she can carry on her back, including her pack weight. So I probably won't start out maxing that out. I'll probably start lower and then we'll build up to it as she gets her trail legs, but that'll be about the maximum weight that she'll be toting at any given time. For her big three, for her shelter, she will be sleeping in the Z-Packs triplex with me and my mom. Her pack is the Footwear Palisades pack. I read different reviews on dog packs and this seemed like a good durable pack. One of the features that I like most about it is that you can detach the, what I call saddlebags, the actual pack part of the pack, and leave the harness attached. So if we stop and take a break and I want to leave the harness on her, then I can just pull the pack off so that she has all of that weight off of her. And then in town, we can use the harness if we want to without having to attach the pack to her. It's got several different zippers and compartments for easy organization, and it seems like a pretty well put together pack, and I read some good reviews about it, so I figured why not, we'll give it a go. For her sleep system, she's going to be using the Thermarest Z-Lite pad. I cut a couple of segments off of it because she didn't need the length of the whole pad, And the pack that I'm using, the Mariposa Gossamer Gear pack, had a sit pad for the back panel, so I just removed that, folded up the Z-Lite, and that's where I'm going to carry that at because it helped keeps the pack more rigid having some kind of pad there. So I figured instead of carrying the extra weight of a sit pad, I could just use that. I generally don't use sit pads anyway, but it'll be real easy to just pull that pad out and lay it down on the ground for her, so when we're taking breaks, she has some cushion to, you know, relax a little bit. They do have doggies sleeping bags. I didn't think that that was necessary for the time of year that we're going right now since it's going to be the summertime, so I just got her a fleece blanket from Walmart that weighs about 10 ounces. So I'll just fold that up and put it on her sleeping pad so she has a little bit more cushion and insulation. And to start out with in the first stretch, if she seems to be chilly, I'm going to have a quilt so I can always throw that over the top of her. And then once we get out of the first stretch, I can figure out something else, maybe order one of those sleeping bags for her if she needs it. Even though we'll be using the harness of the pack, I wanted to have a collar on her anyway because in town we might use the collar instead. I'm not sure if she'll wear both on the trail or not yet. I'm still deciding on that. But the collar I got is also from Footwear. It's called the Crag Dog Collar. It's lightweight, it's soft, it has a reflective material on it, and it just seemed like, you know, a pretty good collar for the trail. The leash that she will be using is the Footwear Roamer leash. It's 7.3 feet to 11 feet. It just is adjustable. And you can either wear it on your hand or you can even do like a belt-like deal with it so you wear it around your waist. I'll probably end up having it to where it's set to be handheld and then just clip it in my hip belt. My idea is that she'll be walking behind me if I'm leading, and then my mom will be walking behind her. Or if my mom is in the front, then my mom can lead, Fancy can be ahead of me, and then I'll be behind her. But that way we've got two people on either side of her just to kind of help her feel a little bit more protected, and then also to help with, you know, if another dog comes running up and encroaching on our territory, you know, we can just kind of keep them separate because she really doesn't love when other dogs just run up and sniff her butt and lick her face and things like that, which, you know, some people are introverts, some people are extroverts, and I think the same is true with dogs. For her kitchenware, we have the Footwear packable bowl for food. It's really cool. It's collapsible and has what seems to be a waterproof lining on it, so you could fill it with water if you wanted to, or with food. I haven't tried putting water in it yet. We're just going to use that one for food. But then I have a Sea to Summit X cup, the little collapsible mug like I use for my coffee, to use for water for her. We didn't need a huge water dish. We'll be stopping often for water breaks pretty much anytime I feel like drinking water or I see her panting a lot, then I'll have water available to just pour in that little mug. That way we're not wasting a ton of water or having to deal with pouring a lot of water in a dish and then pouring it back into the container that I'm keeping it in. Now let's talk about footwear. There are some people who put little boots or dog shoes on their dogs to backpack in. I'm really hoping that her paws will kind of build up resistance and she won't have to wear them all the time, because I feel like they can rub and cause issues that you wouldn't have if you weren't using them. But just in case, I'm carrying from Footwear some Grip Trex all-terrain paw wear, just in case we end up with some blisters or we're going through an area that seems particularly hot to walk on. You know, I don't want her feet to be in pain. And if she ends up with a big blister and I dress it with some gauze and some medical tape, then the little boots will help prevent her feet from getting torn up more or having dirt in it. So we may not end up needing them, but for the first few stretches, I want to have them just in case. And honestly, I'll probably just keep carrying them the whole time because, you know, one little thing goes wrong or we're in an area where it's real hot and then I'm having to carry her. I would rather carry the shoes than be in a situation where I have to carry her. For the inside of the shoes, they make little liners or socks to just help with the chafing of the shoe on the foot. So I've got a set of those also. I've warmed her up to the idea of most of her gear. We started eating out of the food bowl and drinking water out of the little X cup. The boots are one thing that she really hasn't warmed up to yet. We haven't practiced with those a whole lot. It's one of the things that we might be throwing her to the wolves with, but if we're in the situation where we have to use them and everything else seems pretty normal, then hopefully we'll be okay. If any of y'all have suggestions on how you've warmed your dogs up to the idea of boots, please feel free to let me know in the comments, because I feel like this is something that might put her in freak out mode, so tips are definitely welcome. Another item that we are bringing is a muzzle. The one that I'll be using with her is one that she can actually take treats through and drink through and pant and all of that, so it's not anything that's real restrictive on her. We went through muzzle training and obedience classes and have since been working on that. And that's more or less if we're in a real concentrated area with people who have dogs loose that might not be good at respecting other people's space, then that way I have the option of putting that on her. I don't intend to have it on her all the time, but you know, she's pretty respectful of other dogs' spaces. She prefers to not be around them. I think a lot of her anxiety with other dogs is fear-based, so if another dog runs up and is just all in her face and doesn't respect her space, then she can be aggressive in reaction. So I'm hoping having the muzzle and teaching her that, you know, hey, we're around other dogs sometimes, and when we are, it's a happy experience and we get treats. You know, I would prefer that everybody we meet on the trail have their dogs leashed and, you know, not have the situation where they aren't going to respect our space, specifically Fancy space. But I know that that's not realistic. So we've been working with the muzzle and getting that, you know, more normalized, and it's a happy, exciting thing because we get treats when we have on the muzzle. So hopefully if we're in those areas, then, you know, it's not going to be anything that's going to freak her out or anything like that, but we'll, you know, help put her in the situation to learn that it's okay if other dogs approach while also protecting them and her. Now let's talk about medical supplies. Something that I did in regards to medical supplies, but as a preventative, is I got Fancy a rattlesnake vaccination. This is something that I learned about recently. They get the initial injection and then about a month later, they get the booster. So about a month ago, we got the first one. We just got the booster. And the vet said that this doesn't mean that she's definitely free and clear if she gets bitten, but it should help buy us some time and kind of reduce the severity of the reaction to a rattlesnake bite. Obviously, in a perfect world, I hope that she will not get bitten, but I know that it's definitely a possibility. So it was worth it to me to have a little peace of mind that, you know, if we're in the middle of a long stretch and she gets bitten by a rattlesnake, that it'll help buy us some time. The vaccine isn't permanent, you know, it doesn't last forever, but it is guaranteed to last a year, and the vet says likely even up to 2 years. They just haven't completed testing to where they can guarantee that. I'm also going to carry some Benadryl. I've seen some contradictory articles. Some say that Benadryl might help with something like a snake bite in a dog. Some say that it does not, but I've read that regardless, it won't hurt. So I'm going to take some just in case. I'm hoping that having either myself or my mom up front and somebody else behind, that, you know, we can keep our eye out for any rattlesnakes and hopefully prevent that from even happening. You know, if one of us gets bit, we can always hit the SOS button on the inReach and call for help. But if she gets bit, I doubt that a search and rescue team is going to come out and get her. So if y'all know any different or any services that they have that you can sign up for where somebody will come in and rescue your dog if it's hurt, I would love to be informed of that, because, you know, anything that I can do to make sure that I keep her safe. Because, you know, I'm going out there on my own accord. My mother is going out there on her own accord. And while I would feel horrible if anything happened to my mom, you know, Fancy is going out there because we're making her. And, you know, I always try to keep that in mind when people ask me, you know, what do you think about taking a dog on a thru hike or, you know, on a long backpacking trip? And I think that you owe it to your animal to make sure that they have the best time possible and that they're enjoying themselves. So I'm always open to suggestions on how to keep her safe and also enjoying herself. I'm also planning to take some Musher's wax. I've heard that that's pretty good for dogs' feet while they're out on backpacking trips. And I plan to take some gauze wrap and also some self-adhesive wrap, again, just in case she ends up with some blisters or sore paws, just to kind of help protect that from getting infected, and some antibiotic ointment. And since we're at the end of the video, it's an appropriate time to talk about dog doo-doo. What I'm gonna do is carry a deuce of spades on the outside of my pack. It'll be convenient to have for mom to use and myself, and also to have handy for Fancy, because you're supposed to follow the same leave no trace standards with your dog as you do with yourself. So if I notice her bowing up and hunching her back, then I can grab the deuce of spades and go take care of it pretty quickly. So that is all of the gear right now that I'm aiming to take for Fancy. If any of y'all have experience backpacking with a dog and you have any suggestions, like, I know that it's a good idea to keep their nails filed and trimmed, and hers have been recently trimmed. so they don't get snagged on anything or broken. Just any little tips and tricks that you've learned along the way with your dog, feel free to share that in the comments below, because I am not claiming to be an expert in backpacking with dogs. This is something that is very new to me, so I'm excited to learn and then come back and share some of that with y'all. But I'm also, as I mentioned before, open to any tips or ideas that y'all have to make sure that she enjoys herself. Thank y'all so much for watching, and if you want to see Fancy hopefully grow in this experience and come out a more confident and happy dog, then make sure to subscribe and hit the little bell, and you can follow our updates as we go. Thank y'all so much for watching, and we will see y'all next time.